Hurricane Melissa was one of the most powerful hurricanes on record. This Category 5 storm caused devastation in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, permanently changing the lives of those living and working in that region. Here in Connecticut, many residents have felt the ripple effect. The West Indian community makes up one of the largest immigrant populations in Connecticut. There are 70,000 West Indian immigrants in Hartford alone. It's been a challenging time for members of this community. Many were unable to reach loved ones at the height of the storm. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, members of the West Indian diaspora of Connecticut join us. With us are Azaria Tyler. She's a member of the Jamaican American Connection in New Haven. Azaria, welcome to Where We Live.
Thank you.
And also with us is Dr. Gary Rule. He's an internal medicine physician and a member of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford. And he's also the health sector representative for the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. Doctor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Catherine.
And also Carolyn Vermont. She is the vice president of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport. Carolyn, appreciate you being on as well.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, let us know if your community is doing anything to help following Hurricane Melissa. Let us know, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. You can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. So, Azaria, I want to start with you here. This has been a particularly challenging couple of weeks for people in the West Indian community. What have the last few weeks been like for you and your family?
Oh man, the last few weeks have been nerve-wracking. Just up until Tuesday, I hadn't heard from my 89-year-old grandfather, who is completely blind and living on his own in Montego Bay. And so waiting and trying to get words and video and just hear what's going on have been very nerve-wracking and hard to sleep. And just process everything, especially with us doing so much boots on the ground here in Connecticut and just not even knowing how our own loved ones are doing while they're without power and, anything.
Were you able to contact him?
Yes. So my father and I, we typically call several times out of the day just to see if we would get someone on the phone. And I mean, for days, for the whole week, up until Tuesday, I was able to finally get someone on the phone, and my uncle answered. And I just remember everyone screaming and just like praising God that we finally got a chance to speak with them, and they're in good spirits. So, the fact that you can hear the smiles through the phone, that was just so touching.
I'm sure that was really comforting to hear, right?
Oh
After
my
all the
gosh.
anxiety.
Yes. I mean, I think I slept all night versus waking up at like 5 a.m. So that was really good. And just hearing their stories and how each day was for them,
How unprecedented is this storm? Hurricanes and major storms are common in the region, but this was a Category 5.
Yeah, this was a big one. I think a lot of people thought that this storm was going to be, just a lot of wind, a lot of rain, but I don't think they realized the magnitude that this storm was and really how big this storm was and the fact that it was sitting, right, for a portion, which made it even more difficult.
And when you were finally able to make contact and making sure that everyone's okay, what did they share with you? What it's like on the ground?
Yeah, my grandfather, the first thing he said was, I survived a big one. I survived a big one because he was in Jamaica during Hurricane Gilbert, and he remembered them not being able to evacuate people and just the support that they are getting now. So he was able to compare, and one of the things that he said was, he thought at one point the roof was gonna rip off like on day one, and on hour one, and it just, he said that the things that the community was doing just to try to preserve what they had, and just seeing what you've built for years and years be torn apart was really hard.
And it sounds like you have heard from leadership in Jamaica, or what was that like?
So watching and waiting to hear from leaders was very good and also interesting at the same time. I saw that, the Prime Minister went to the different towns and parishes to actually see the impact that was going on and how devastating it was to the communities. And so, he still has a lot of work to do, a lot of towns and rural areas to go in. But to see him actually get out and speak to the people and hear what they need, I think was interesting and good at the same time.
And what do we know about what infrastructure has been impacted?
Well, we know that roads are no longer roads. We know that some people can't even get to the next town, or they have to figure out new paths. We know that there is still no cell service. There is no electricity. And a lot of people are really living with no shelter right now.
When Dr. Rule, you grew up in Jamaica and you came to Hartford when you were 14, and you are an internal medicine physician here in Hartford and have done multiple medical missions to Jamaica. What have the last few weeks been like for you personally and professionally?
The lead up to the hurricane was really hard. So as Azaria said, just the anxiety of watching, knowing it's coming, not really knowing what it's going to do. You hear about the wind, etc. And so in some sense, it's good that we were able to prepare to evacuate some persons, get them into shelters and kind of prepare that thing. But I think that just prolonged the anxiety of all of that. Most of my family lives in Kingston. They're predominantly okay, minor water damage. Some relatives in Westmoreland lost their roof. And I can talk about just an experience that they described after that. Just hearing the shrieking of the wind, the water coming in. A family who lost their roof. They huddled in the bathroom, three of them in the bathroom. The roof is gone. The water is in. You're flooded. You're trapped. That anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen next, just thinking, am I going to survive? What's going to happen? Can someone save me? And you're stuck in it for 3 days. The aftermath of that is extremely traumatic. And then when things have passed by, you realize everything that you've worked for is completely gone. So for the folks living on the ground who've lost their loved ones, certainly condolences to them and our concern about them and their friends and their family that they've lost their lives and are really injured. And that has really been traumatic. That's the personal side. Professionally, as you watch it as a healthcare provider, we know we have to do something, right? We have to go in because, as Azaria said, the infrastructure is gone. There's no communication. There's no water. Sanitation is gone. Food, shelter, you're starting from a clean slate. So the community realizes that we have to mobilize and do something. And it's hard when you're here because you want to be on the ground, but recognizing again, well, how do you get onto the island? Because one of the airports, now it's up and running, but to get onto the island, how do you do that? And then once you're there, how do you access persons? Because the roads are blocked. There's millions of debris in the road. So it's really been a very anxiety-producing, just watching it. And the videos doesn't help. But I think in some ways, what it really has done for the community is just to mobilize us to recognize that we can do something, and we will. But just to be sure that we plan the logistics that once we get there, we're doing that safely, we're helping people, and that we're not going there, that we become also threatened by what's there.
Right, and I want to ask too, it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration efforts in order to do that, in order to start the mobilization and actually make it happen when you're there. And so Azaria shared earlier about how some of the infrastructure has been impacted. Curious to hear what's the healthcare system like there right now? Any hospitals impacted? So if they are, how do you facilitate healthcare when you're there?
Right. So in any disaster like this, if you can just imagine, so when the hurricane hit, it really affected the western third, so about 5 parishes, and it landed at ground zero, which is at the south. And that hospital, which is in the capital, that's completely gone. And then 5 major hospitals have been demolished or severely affected. Mm-hmm. And the backbone also of the healthcare system is the primary healthcare centers where people with chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, mental health concerns, that's where they go for care. So if the infrastructure is down, there's no communication, there's no road, there's nothing there, then the question is where do people go for help? And the way that we have done part of that is to respond by having a field hospital. So right now there's a field hospital in the south. It serves, again, only 50 persons with a theater, an operating room, an emergency department. But really that's not sufficient because you're responding to the immediate need of people who are injured. But then you also have people who are unsheltered. You have people who have chronic medical diseases. They've lost their health care. You have pregnant parents, right? Pregnant women about to deliver. Well, where do they go? So the impact is broad, and it's also quite deep. So the initial response is the field hospitals that you can set up, and there aren't enough of them. If persons need pharmacy, typically what we would do is do a mobile unit, a mobile pharmacy to go out, but then the issue is, well, how do you access them? If persons are in a rural community and they're cut off by flooding, you can't access them. So we really have to be very innovative in terms of, well, how do we reach people? If we can't do so by land, we have to go by air to drop supplies in, drop medications in, drop tents in, et cetera. But the partnership has to be multilateral. So there are international agencies that have responded. The Pan American Health Organization has responded. The U.S., the U.K., the European Union, El Salvador, Barbados, Samaritan's Purse. You cannot do this by yourself, obviously.
Right. And it always feels like it's a lot more complicated than you think. And once you're there, I imagine more questions are raised than answers given. And Carolyn, can you respond to what we heard from Azaria and Dr. Rule so far and tell us what has these last few weeks been like for you?
So as I listened to Azaria, I said, wow, her experience is so close to mine. I'm from Trelawney. Trelawney was really hit in this storm. And I come from a little town called Danieltown. It's a town that's comprised of my family. And in order to get into that town and be part of it is to marry someone in my family. And so we didn't hear from anyone there. And we were just really worried. We kept calling and the phone would just ring, but no response. So it was just a few days ago, someone from the town, I guess they were able to get close to a cell tower. And so they called us. And so it was a relief to know that no one died. However, they've suffered a lot of structural damages. Our family home there, part of the roof flew off. We have a shop there that, we rent out. The whole roof flew off. So, listening to them and, no food, no electricity, just really nothing to survive on a daily basis. But thank goodness we do have different organizations, some of the local food industry folks who are going to the different islands to provide some food for them. So, they're suffering. There's some relief, minimal relief from them, for them. Now, my sister and I, we wanted to go down right away. And then a relative there, they said, where are you going to stay, if you come down? Now, one of my nieces, she went down and she was saying to us, well, I'm in Falmouth to help family, but there's no running water, no electricity here, but she wanted to get down there and do as much as she can. Now, my siblings who live closer to Kingston, they're doing okay. They lost power, but overall the storm just didn't hit them as bad as it hit other areas, especially the parish of Trelawney. So again, as Rosaria said, just that relief of, okay, hearing from someone in Danieltown, they're alive. And, I can't say they're doing okay, but they're alive. And that means a lot.
No, absolutely. And we're obviously sorry to hear that your family is suffering, but glad to hear that at least they're okay. And Carolyn, because the West Indian immigrant population is one of the largest immigrant populations here in Connecticut. I want to learn more about what the community has done to support each other. But what do you want our listeners first to know about this community and the culture?
So in the greater Bridgeport community, everyone is stepping up. For us, the West Indian group, we're collaborating with Kingdom Builders Impact Ministry. Their pastor is from Jamaica, so we're taking donations, bed sheets, pillowcases, towels, feminine hygiene products, toothpaste, deodorant, first aid kits, flashlights, heavy duty garbage bags, heavy duty work gloves, tarps, so they can put tarps over their houses temporarily. So doing that, I'm also involved with the Rotary Club, and we have a connection with Shelterbox. And so Shelterbox actually, during disaster, they provide fully equipped tents for families. So just a lot of collaboration. Today, my church, Messiah Baptist Church, we're sending some barrels down today. So the community has really come together. And it's not just the West Indians who are coming together. It just feels like the whole community is coming together to help those that have been impacted, which is a significant portion of the island.
Well, Azaria, I'm seeing you nodding. I'm assuming you agree with what Carolyn is sharing.
Yes. And I'm so happy to hear this. It's true. It's the community, the pouring in has been wide. I could say, our local dentist office, our U-Hauls. I mean, they're all trying to figure out, well, what is it that we can do? U-Haul's like, okay, I'll give you storage. If you're not going to go right now, you're going to need to place these barrels. We have companies that are coming in, dropping off barrels and giving us just product to really help us when we, get this over in Jamaica. And I think it's so important to the items that you just named out, because a lot of people are like, well, what do you need? What do they need? It's never enough of something, right? Because there's just so much impact that has happened. And so I listened to the church, saying, well, we can step up. We'll take clothes. We'll help you sort. We have this space. We can do this. And so that's been a very big thing. And even in New Haven, in the greater New Haven region, I would say our libraries are, let us have a drop-off location so that any place you turn, there's a place for you to drop off. If you're in this area, you can come. If you don't have transportation, you should be able to walk here and still be able to give something. And that's something that the communities have been responding and saying that they want to do, and knowing how wide this storm was and that it just didn't just hit Jamaica. So there's just so much that we can do, that they want us to do, that we are trying to do.
And before we go to break, Dr. Ruhl, we'd love your response too in terms of what you're seeing, and what about your community that you would like to share with our listeners?
So the West Indian community, as Azara kind of mentioned, is broad, right? So you have persons from Haiti, from Trinidad, from Barbados. You have other islands that have been affected, Cuba, the Dominican Republic. And we have been embedded in Connecticut for many, many years. It's just not today. And if you look at legislatures, educators, artists, music, business. We're embedded there. We may not seem that obvious, but we're really the fabric of the community, and we've always supported Connecticut and the greater Hartford region for many, many years. And we respond likewise to when you have crises. We've done that. So it's good to see that in our time of need, that the persons that we've also supported, the economy that we've supported, have said, we are there with you, we support you, and people are really pulling together from all walks of life, from all industries to really help Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Dominican Republic recover. And really that's what we need. We cannot do this by ourselves.
Yeah. You've been listening to Dr. Gary Rule, who's an internal medicine physician and member of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford, Azaria Tyler, who's a member of the Jamaican American Connection in New Haven, and Carolyn Vermont, who's the vice president of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport. And for our listeners, you can learn more about all of these organizations and what you can do to provide support for this region. We have a list of donation spots on today's show page at ctpublic.org/wherewelive. More after this break. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Throughout the Caribbean, housing, roads, and other infrastructure have been devastated by Hurricane Melissa. The powerful storm destroyed hospitals, homes, and other critical infrastructure. This week, Connecticut-based humanitarian aid organization MREs will be sending an emergency medical team to Jamaica. And today, we're speaking with several West Indian heritage organizations about how they're working to raise funds and collect goods for relief efforts. And listeners can learn more about these organizations by visiting ctpublic.org/wherewelive. Still with us is Azaria Tyler, who's a member of the Jamaican American Connection in New Haven, Dr. Gary Rule, who's an internal medicine physician and a member of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford, and Carolyn Vermont, who's the vice president of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport. So, Azaria, can you talk about some of the challenges that we've seen when it comes to delivering aid into this region? I think Dr. Rule mentioned earlier that there's such a desire to want to help, but sometimes logistics is a problem.
Yeah, logistics is and has been a problem. But I think as we work together, we are learning what these challenges are and what are better routes we can take. So one of the things right now, that if you're getting barrels filled and you're trying to ship barrels, what does that look like when it gets to the ports? And how long is that going to take? Once it's in Jamaica at the ports there, who's picking that up? And so that collaboration and that partnership with an organization and boots on the ground in Jamaica is important, especially if you can't get there yourself, and knowing, trying to make sure that your items actually reach where it's supposed to go. And so right now it's been just so much research and conversations on those, places like Miami in Florida, how they are a little bit closer, those who are getting items on boats, and what is their process? What is that timeline? What is it that we need to do to make sure that we can get these items over there? And so working with New York and making sure that we're in conversation with the shipping companies, making sure that, our items will make it through customs and all these things. So it's been a learning time. I'll say that.
Well, and do you know the supplies are making it to your family or to those who need them?
Yeah. So actually, when I spoke to my grandfather, I was so happy to hear that there were at least 3 organizations. One was a church that partnered up with another organization, but there were people on the grounds because, again, the roads are ruined right now, a lot of them. So a lot of them have been just walking and coming in neighborhoods where they can. And now hearing that there's more air flights and people being able to drop things into these towns that they can't actually even, some of the roads you can't even walk through, right? So that's been something that we've been learning and seeing right now.
Well, and another learning curve, I think, here, Dr. Rule, is what can you tell us about how the government shutdown has impacted sending aid to this region?
So anything that actually reduces communication, connecting people who have the resources, is another, more than a ripple, that really affects the emergency aid. Because as Azari and Carolyn just said, if the infrastructure is destroyed, you have an immediate need. For example, you have an immediate need to do a rescue. Jamaica doesn't have the capacity to have helicopters and to rescue folks, so really have to reach out to folks. So in the government shutdown, when that doesn't happen as smoothly as possible, that's a delay. Whether it's a day or two, then people's lives are at risk. But then to continue, the things that we need, right? So if the need is immediate, if you ship something, whatever cargo, typically that takes 14 days. The fastest way to get that is by air. And if that's slowed down, then you can't get what you need to at the point where it's needed. So the government shutdown definitely has affected not only the rescue, but the recovery. And so as people are listening as well, we should be donating, but I do this in two pockets. If there is an immediate need for shelter, food, and water, you have to do two tracks. What's the fastest way to get it in? A cargo. You have to fly it in. If that's slowed down by any mechanism, that's a delay. Likewise, you can ship it, but it's 14 days. But if there are things that are already in country, it probably makes more sense to consider a financial donation where an organization can purchase what they need in country or get it from a neighbor that's closer to just at least address that immediate need. So that's how you have to kind of think about it. Initially, really, cash is better if it can be bought in country. Because the things that we're collecting, again, it's good. And one of the things we really need is more air cargo shipments, airlines to partner with us to say, look, once the West Indian community or in Connecticut has gotten their donations, how can we help you to get it the fastest way? And it's really going to be by cargo.
So we're going to get into more details about how listeners can support and help in a little bit. But I want to mention that ahead of this program, we spoke to State Senator Saul Anwar, and the Democrat says much of the disaster response playing out in Connecticut will lay in the hands of local groups, as we're hearing so far, and not the federal government.
I mean, if you look at our position for the federal government in the recent past, they have actually stated that they would not even support FEMA for within directly in the United States. And so it is up to the people of United States to do their share. I can share with you that the West Indian population, the Caribbean community of American citizens, they are directly impacted and they are very much focused to try and help provide the support. There's an immediate need.
Carolyn, we'd love to hear your response to what we just heard from Senator Anwar.
You know, I think we need everyone to step up as we do go through this recovery period. And, you know, if there are folks out there who are not stepping up right now or don't see the immediate need, I think we just have to continue educating them in hopes that, you know, they'll work with the rest of us.
And what are the kinds of support that are needed right now that you're seeing?
So right now, as Dr. Rule said, I think that financial piece, you know, I believe it's Western Union who is not charging anything right now. I think it's till the end of November to send money. But then again, you know, where are they going to be able to purchase the items that they need? But, you know, whatever is available to them, at least they will have some funds to purchase those items. But I think the immediate needs right now is a couple of items that we are collecting as the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport, you know, the first aid kits, the tarps, to put over their homes. So many of the homes have been destroyed, but the actual structure of the homes, for some of them, are pretty solid. But with them losing their roof and, the water coming in, I remember watching the video of one woman, and she was crying. Her son had died recently, and her house was destroyed, and just talking about the emotional piece. And, she said, my son died recently, and all his memory, all his pictures are gone. And so, you just felt her pain. Of course, there's so many others who have lost so much. But I think, the needs right now is, the hygiene products, the pens, the diapers. I think a lot of those daily necessities are the greatest needs right now.
Well, and you just mentioned a lot of practical items to donate. Building on what Dr. Rule said earlier, is it your opinion as well is it better to give a monetary donation depending on the situation?
I think in some cases, so I look at my town, Danieltown, monetary donations will be good, but I just don't know how much they'll be able to access. So I think the non-monetary donations right now would be more impactful as far as recovery efforts.
Well, and Dr. Rule, in the past, you've taken medical missions to Jamaica and the region. Can you tell us about what that experience has been like, and will you be taking more trips in the near future?
Yes. So the most immediate one is we did a COVID mission in 2021, and we were at the Savannah Lamar Hospital for 6 weeks. And it was a coalition of several nonprofits that went there to support their COVID response. So many organizations came together, a group of about 70 healthcare providers, not only from Jamaica, but Friends of Jamaica. And we provided actually healthcare mostly to the emergency department and the outpatient centers. And we rotated for about 7 days and was there for a good time. And that was a great experience because we did really primary care. We had some OBGYN on board, some peds, really the entire specialties responding with nurses, et cetera. And that's what's needed now, because if the healthcare system in those 5 parishes are disabled, you also have to imagine the healthcare persons, the personnel, they've lost their homes. They've lost their cars. They've lost their belongings. So they need someone to replace them. Not that they wouldn't do that work, but the thought is we would be able to support them to do their work, to relieve them. But then as the other piece is you can respond to that disaster area. But as people become displaced, they're going to shift to other areas as well. Those health systems will be overburdened. Mm-hmm. So they need our help to do that. We're in the process of organizing a more comprehensive response, most likely over 6 months to 1 year. We're based upon the information that we have from I'll call them the command center on the ground, where they know where the need is. They know where persons are. They know what the healthcare services are, and we can plan with them. We'll send a team to X place for X amount of time to support your outpatient, your surgeons, et cetera. That way we can plan. And if we have imperfect data or information, our decisions are going to be imperfect. Mm-hmm. So as much as possible, they can do the assessment and figure out where the need is, then we can best partner with them. But really, I think based upon the devastation, it's not like we can go there before we'd go there for 1 week or 6 weeks and we're gone. This support really has to be long-term, I'd say over a year.
Well, I was just going to say, it sounds like it's less short-term, of course, more long-term. And actually, with what you just shared, when we talk about emergency medicine or support needs going into disaster regions, we often think about addressing physical health for good reason. As you mentioned, lots of hospitals destroyed and they don't have the infrastructure to provide that. But when it comes to mental health needs or emotional support, what does that look like, Doctor?
So that is something that the team definitely will have to do. We have lots of mental health providers who are willing to go because they recognize not only persons who have had a mental health condition. But even for us and the persons who have not actually been physically involved, that is traumatic. Azaria said she could not sleep, right? That's what, when you have an immediate, drastic change in your circumstance, that's really what trauma is. Unexpected, loss of life, loss of limb, sudden change in life. Psychosocial support for the community, for the first responders, for the healthcare professionals, for the leaders. Because dealing with a disaster does something to you. And folks, and I would say this, a lot of persons want to volunteer and they want to go into the disaster area. You have to realize there's no water, there's no electricity, there's debris, sanitation is impacted. If you're not disaster prepared, if you're not disaster ready, yes, you should volunteer, but going into the disaster zone may not be your best option. We still need your help, but think about going to the area where people have been displaced and provide your service there. Not everyone should be working in the disaster zone, because if you're not prepared for what you're going to see, the videos don't do justice to really what is happening on the ground. And if you're traumatized by that, being physically there is a whole different story. So definitely psychosocial support and mental health support for really the community, but other persons as well is needed.
When I want to follow your train of thought, Doctor, and ask Azaria and Carolyn, what are you doing to support yourself? Because like the doctor said, when you see these things, when you are witnessing it, you're not just seeing it on video, you're not just watching it on TV, but these are your families that are being impacted. Azaria, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a battle. But what I can say is I get on the phone with my nieces, my nephews, and we have conversation. That's been our biggest thing right now, coming together as a community on the phones with each other and, just sharing our thoughts, our prayers, and just really not hiding what is happening and not, muting it, being in tune with our feelings, because I have nieces and nephews here who moms are still there and they have not talked to them. And so making sure that we speak with them and try to share some comfort where we can, I think is important. A lot of people right now also can't talk because they're just so sick to their stomach. Everything that they've built is gone. And so that trauma is real right now. And I think, giving people grace and time is necessary, but also checking in. How are you doing? Is being that human side, right?
Carolyn, what are you doing to take care of yourself during these times?
So for me, I go from sadness, crying, to a little bit of joy, back to sadness. As I watch the videos and, just listening to the helplessness. I think it was just yesterday I was watching a video and the person, she was just calling out for help. She said, we have all these dead animals. When will those animals, we need help. We need these dead animals, to be moved somehow. And then I start feeling joy when I see somebody like Shaggy sending down a whole plane of supplies, and the other reggae, entertainers, they're getting ready to do a fundraising concert in New York. The singer Tyrese, just this week, seeing him down there with the natives, just trying to do as much as he can. So that part brings me joy. I, see these entertainers, among others, just doing all they can. When you send a plane of supplies, that's very impactful than, my church trying to, send 10 barrels. As Dr. Rove said, with the barrels, it's going to take a little while. to get there. So I feel good, seeing so many people, so many of our own people, from Jamaica really standing up. So I feel some joy there, but then it's back to sadness. You look at it and you say, wow, look at this impact. Look at people suffering. Yeah. And, I think we take so much, at least I do, for granted being here in the U.S. We have, our homes, our cars, enough food to eat. And I see these videos, of people suffering. They've lost their home, they're hungry, and they've lost loved ones. And, they're putting videos of their mom or their aunt or their sister or their brother and saying, has anyone seen them? They've gotten lost, during the hurricane. And sometimes, you see a nice article where they were found, but there's still others that they still don't know where family members are. So it's depressing, and I have my crying moments. And I have that concept in my head that it has to get better. There's nowhere to go but up in this situation.
Well, we really appreciate everyone joining us for this conversation today and sharing your stories and allowing us a glimpse of what it's like for you and for everyone with us today. You've been listening to Carolyn Vermont, who's the Vice President of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport, Dr. Gary Rule, who is a physician and member of West Indian Social Club of Hartford, and also Azaria Tyler, who is with the Jamaican American Connection in New Haven. And for our listeners, you can learn more about all of these organizations and what you can do to support them during these times. Visit our show page at ctpublic.org/wherewelive and let us know if your community is doing anything to respond to Hurricane Melissa. Let us know what you're doing. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about the impacts Hurricane Melissa had on the Caribbean and how local West Indian organizations are stepping in to help. So before we get back to the conversation, I got a quick question from Facebook. Kathy shared with us, curious to know what about the animals there do folks work to rescue, feed, or shelter them? Because there are a lot of stray dogs on the island. Very sad for them as well as for the people. So Azaria, I think you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so my family is in a little town called Tucker Irwin, and oddly, there were a bunch of goats, a bunch of cows, little pigs huddled up in like one area near a school, and it's as if they knew like this is made out of cement. Let's huddle, and so a lot of them were able to survive this storm. But there has been so many animals so many people who had like 8 goats in their yards, in places they're gone. So there has been a lot of the strays have found some place, I would say, but then there's a lot of people who owned animals that they no longer have them now.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for that question. And I think, Carolyn, you might have mentioned this earlier, but can you talk about how the pandemic impacted the West Indian population in Connecticut?
So I think here in Connecticut, we're devastated. We're not as devastated as the victims, but the fact that, we have families there, we have friends, and, if we're not connecting to anyone, this is our island, our beautiful Jamaica. And that's what we're accustomed to seeing. So the impact, Dr. Rowe talked about trauma. I think, we're feeling trauma also. And I think it's that feeling of, okay, I'm doing something, but I'm not doing enough. It's that feeling like we have to do more. We have to do more. And, sometimes we just mentally don't have the capacity right now to do more than what we are already doing. And I think, when we do watch these videos or hear from families, we do know that there is some impact, but we also realize there is such much more work that needs to be done during this recovery period. So I think as a country, as an island, and folks in the U.S., we're all family for this island. So everybody wants to do their part in this.
Well, so there's so much that has been gone through recently, and we got about 2-3 minutes here, so I want to make sure I get to everyone here. But because we're having this conversation today, but also we're during the storm, post-storm. But what about before a storm? Do we know how is this region preparing for future storms? We know it's going to happen. Is there anything that needs to be done beforehand to make this area more resilient to intense storms in the future?
I think as we learn and we experience this another big storm, we grow. We have to take a step back and see what worked, what did not work, what did we not do. And there was more evacuations, there were more boots on the ground before the storm. But I think now we have learned, we need to go in more neighborhoods. Let's go rescue our elderly, our, women that are pregnant. Let's get them out before these storms hit. And I think that as we assess, we're able to see how we can actually help and, build more. Maybe it's laying out more wood. It's laying out the shutters. They're gonna have to. We will learn. We are learning, I will say, and we're gonna. Hurricanes are every season, right? So we take this time, we learn, and we come back hard.
Yeah. So there are international organizations, WHO, the Pan American Health Organization, that actually has a disaster plan. In Jamaica specifically, there's also the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. This is what they do. And we had some preparation last year with Beryl, when Beryl actually didn't cause the damage, but Jamaica, Grenada, St. Lucia were affected. That's something that you have to do in terms of preparation. And you have to think about the what-if scenarios, right? Mm-hmm. What if you have no power? What if you can't communicate? So that after this event, we have to revisit our disaster preparedness and say what worked, what didn't work, were there contingencies that should have been in place that we didn't think about, because we didn't think about that we'd have lost communication. Now we need to be able to communicate by potentially Starlink. So after it's over, you do the situational analysis. What do we need to put in place to be sure that we have the redundancies? But this storm is unprecedented, hurricane, unprecedented. But it's also to learn, because I think we're going to see more storms of this magnitude hitting other places, and we have to be sure that we're prepared to respond to it.
Well, thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. You've been listening to Dr. Gary Rule, who's the internal medicine physician and member of the West Indian Social Club in Hartford, and also the health sector representative for the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. Thank you so much, Dr. Rule, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're also listening to Azaria Tyler, who is the member of the Jamaican American Connection in New Haven. Azaria, appreciate your time as well.
Thank you.
And also Carolyn Vermont, who's the vice president of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport. Carolyn, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
And listeners, you can learn more about all of these organizations and what you can do to provide support for this region. Visit our show page at ctpublic.org/where we live. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.